first. So, all right. Well, welcome to the call, everyone. My name is Dr. Kurt Fisnick, and I'm hosting the call tonight. We have a special guest, Tom Mower, Sr. From out in Springville, Utah, the chief biochemist out at Sisel and Supernaturals, and we have a couple of guests on the call as well. One of the things that keeps popping up is some people, they just don't understand that, you know, the dosage that's written on a bottle, not just necessarily the age pill, but on other products as well. That's a dosage for primarily, I mean, in my thoughts, that's a dosage for somebody who's otherwise pretty healthy, fairly healthy. And so sometimes we'll notice that they have to take an increased dosage over and above what's listed on the product label to get results. And they sometimes feel like, oh, it's not working for me. And so I thought it'd be nice to have a call with Tom, with the formulator of our product, really explain why this phenomenon takes place and why somebody might need that. Before we bring Tom on, I'm going to bring Katie Larking from Australia on. Katie actually is one of them that she bumped her dosage up and she had some improved results. So Katie, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then I'll mute myself out. And Katie, when you get done, if you want to hand the microphone over to Marsha, okay?
Okay, great. Thanks, Kurt. Thank you, Tom, for being on the call. We're super excited to have you on, as always. So I just thought I'd share a little bit about my experience. So I started on the Age pill back in 2017. I think it was August 2017. And I used the double dose initially as suggested by Tom, which was 12 capsules a day. And I was taking 3, 3, and 3, and 3, because for me, taking 4, I flush quite easily. I get a nice flush quite easily. Anyway, after taking it for about 15 days, I started noticing new hair growth coming around the hairline. And of course, skin had improved considerably. The complexion was better and skin appeared to me firmer. And of course, energy levels had increased, better sleep, etc. So fantastic results, and quite noticeable in before and after photos after 30 days, actually. And I continued doing that for 3 months, which was great. And then I went back down to the normal dose, and I still felt really good. But then after probably another few months, I noticed that the sprouting of the hair and the quite dramatic skin changes. My skin still looked awesome, but it wasn't at the same level, I guess I'd say. Anyway, so I've still been extremely happy with the Age pill. I think it's just an unreal product. But then recently, you know, Dr. Kurt's been doing some testimonial calls, and I've been listening to them, and people were talking and sharing how they've, you know, been taking 12, and the difference they noticed from 6 to 12 was quite significant. So I thought I'd do a little test this month, and I decided to go from 6 back up to 12 a day. And so I started taking 12, and after about 10 days, probably 10, 12 days, I noticed again with my hairline, new hair kind of sprouting, because I've actually kind of got quite thin hair genetically. I guess it's not, I don't have thick hair, but new hair coming along the hairline. And I certainly noticed my energy levels were really excellent, but it went up even a whole nother notch as well. And probably sleep, again, I noticed as well, probably because more energy running around during the day. But so I have seen the physical difference, and also feeling the difference from 6 to 12. For me, that was quite noticeable. So, I mean, I guess the reason also I'm sharing that is because, you know, I like to be able to share that with others. But, you know, given that the recommendation on the bottle is 6, you know, how do you recommend to someone too that, you know, go ahead and take 12? So anyway, I'll save all my questions for the end. But that's my testimonial. From going from 6 to 12. So I just thought it was really interesting experiment to try, and yeah, just quite thrilled with it, really. Well, I'm thrilled with the Age pill anyway. So I'll hand over to, is it Andrea that's going to talk now? Oh, Marsha. Marsha, you're on?
Yeah.
Hi.
Marsha.
Hi, Marsha.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, including Tom. It's lovely to have you on the call. I feel very blessed. Thanks.
So I'll go straight into my testimonial. So last year, I kind of was at the end of a really severe battle with autoimmune. So initially I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia about 4 or 5 years ago. That was after 4 years of being sick and seeing my GP, who really didn't know what to do with me. And then about this time last year, I was very, very, very unwell. I had really severe autoimmune symptoms, including systemic pain. I had to give up my job, which was really sad. I loved my job as a sign language interpreter, but I couldn't remember anything. I wasn't functioning at all. I was sleeping a lot. And I had really bad brain fog and memory loss and just that cognitive function, inability to really communicate. It really got that bad. So at that point, I met Rosalind, and she recommended the Age Pill to me, so I ordered it straight away. I had tried many, many things before this, though. Besides, a myriad of supplements from naturopaths, I tried things like EFT tapping. I saw an osteopath, a kinesiologist, a chiropractor, a musculoskeletal therapist, massage therapists, physiotherapists, homeopath, acupuncturists, and obviously all this cost me a bomb. I even had psychotherapy. I was just so desperate to feel well. I even started doing some coffee enemas at home. I mostly ate organic food, and I also tried many diets, including paleo, vegetarian, vegan, dairy-free, gluten-free, anti-inflammatory, sugar-free, all of those sort of diets. So by the time I started taking the Age Pill, I almost gave up. I almost was ready to become a statistic of autoimmune. At that point, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis because I really got to the point where I couldn't walk properly. I was very, very shaky. And if I did try to go to the shopping centre for anything like essentials, I would only leave the house for essentials or groceries. My daughter would have to help, and I would be in bed for the rest of the day. I didn't realise how much support that I had set up around me. I had people helping me with clipping my doggies and mowing the lawn, and helping with, my daughter was helping a lot around the house. And when she couldn't, because she was at university herself, the house just became a mess. Excuse me just a moment. Yeah, you can do that now, darling. Yep, you can just take them and put them in the tub. Sorry, guys, I'm actually at work, but I promised Katie that I'd do my best to come and on this call to share my story, because I've actually healed from the Age Pill. So going back to last year when I met Ros and she suggested the Age Pill, I was a little bit skeptical, but I trust Ros, and she really, both her and I have been in pursuit of happiness and health and wellness and supplementation for 16 years. So we both are very passionate about optimal health. And me being who I am, I love helping people, and I knew that my purpose in life would eventually end up being one where I would help people. So I tried quite a few different type of businesses, and nothing really sort of gelled and felt right. And so I got rid of those opportunities. So it just didn't feel like it was part of my alignment. But when I started the Age Pill, now remember, I was hardly able to walk and not really able to function properly. Within 8 weeks of taking 6 in the morning and 6 at night of the Age Pill, within 8 weeks, I was back at full-time work. So that was a job that I started in August last year. And it's actually as a vocational trainer. So I help people with intellectual disability to gain employment through a work experience program. So I'm the transitions officer. So that's my little client that I was just talking to. And look, with a job like this, you really need to be on the ball. You're on your feet all day. You've got to be thinking and, obviously communicate with the parents and the employers. And there's just absolutely no way that without the Age Pill, I would have been able to do that. Now, about 6 months later, I thought, I've been on the Age Pill 6 and 6 for about 6 months. And I thought, I think I'm right to go down to 3 and 3. And I tried it, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I really felt most of my symptoms come back. So obviously with taking it, the systemic pain, it immediately went away. The cognitive function went away, dysfunction, sorry, when I first started taking the age pill. And the food allergies were really just ripe. They were very, very, very severe. And some of you have seen my photos on Tom Mower's Facebook page. And so anyway, so I went down to 3 and 3, and within 2 or 3 weeks, most of those symptoms came back. Nowhere near as severe as I first had them, but I realised then that okay, I'm not ready yet. I need to go back onto 6 and 6 because my energy really started to fade. The other, I think probably the most significant testimonial that I would have about the age pill is that I'm off my antidepressants, which makes me so incredibly happy. And not just that just being on the age pill, I feel like it's changed my brain. And I can't explain that. Tom, you'd be better to do that later when you start talking about the age pill. But I didn't realise just how unwell I was until I became better. And I am so extremely happy. I feel so happy. Every day is beautiful and great, and I'm so happy to be alive. So I think for now I'm going to stay on the 6 and 6 until, I don't know, maybe another 12 months or so, and see how I go. I know I've got a lot of cleaning out to do in my body still because I was very, very unwell, and I'm also doing a lot of gut healing, taking a lot of supplements for gut healing. So that's my testimonial for taking 6 and 6. I highly recommend it, and you'll notice a massive big difference, especially if you've got depression, anxiety, or panic attacks, which is something I actually also had at the start of, when I started taking it. So that's me for now, guys.
All right. Well, thanks, Marcia, and thanks, Katie, for sharing your stories. Tom, I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, and I know you know some incredible science behind this, and why it's working, and why people sometimes have to take more, and why it really doesn't work if you're only taking one a day. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Tom.
Okay, well, thanks, Doc, and thanks for those testimonies. They were enlightening in some ways because we've seen this same thing happening in the field. Myself, when I started on it, if I give my sort of personal testimony, I was on 6 and 6. I just did it twice a day. I think you'd be better off if you did it 3 times a day, but it's hard sometimes with my lifestyle and job. I don't think about it in mid part of the day, but I've got it home in my bathroom. It's first thing I take in the morning, last thing I take at night. And so at that, it surprised me because I wanted to accelerate it, because I know with many medications, if you call this a medication, it is a natural medicine, of course, but it's dose dependent. So I also knew there were quite a number of other things with it that science was talking about and trying to address, and they weren't incorporated into other formulations that I saw that were being experimented with or testing. And then along came, the biggest research was done in Harvard Medical School. We can't use that because Harvard Medical School, we can't use their reference. We've taken off our literature, and Dr. David Sinclair, who did all that, because they are spending huge amounts of money. They're going to go into billions of dollars to try and convert this technology into a technology that is patentable. That means they have to make a synthetic molecule with it. Right now, they're doing all of their testing on a compound called NMN. Now, NMN is one of the things that the formulation with that we have, or like some of the competitors have there's a little bit being sold, not much, but they use what they call NR, which is niacinamide riboside, and we're using niacinamide ribose, and so it's very similar to it, but the differences is they both get converted into NMN. And so if you can follow my pathway, I don't want to get you too far off and too technical, but if you These products are precursors, including NMN, into making NAD+. So when that happens, you've got an equation going on. Can you hold, excuse me a second, do you need anything, Tom? Okay. I'll chat with you about it later. I'm kind of taking Doc Fizz here and a call with some Australians, and we're trying to get his psychological disorders taken care of. So yeah, it's a big job. I understand that. So anyway, my son Tom Jr. just popped his head in my office. So I don't know if any of you met him or not. Doc has, of course. But are we still on? I don't hear anything, but
I hear you.
Yeah, you're still on, Tom. I just muted out.
okay. Well, I'm glad you did, and I hope you didn't hear that last statement we're talking about with you, Doc, but we're doing everything in our power to help you. But anyway, the one thing about the important thing they found out, and it's really kind of odd because I'll give you, I don't want to get too far in the stories, but when I was, if any of you were with me in New Ways, you know, I had a product called Life Enhancer, and Life Enhancer was an ancient formula from China, and it went clear back to where it was referenced in the Yellow Emperor's book, which is written 3,000 years before Christ, and it went up through the Ming Dynasty emperors, and when they excavated a tomb from the Ming Dynasty, they had an even more sophisticated formulation of it, but of the ingredients that were there, and they read what it said. That in fact is the very formula we had for Life Enhancer was, and they called it Chin Chin Bao. Bao means treasure, but it was buried with the second emperor of the Ming Dynasty in his sarcophagus itself. He was a Taoist. He believed, a lot of you don't know what that is, but he really believed in the relationship between nature and the human body, and literally the goal was towards immortality, of course. But anyway, he had this formulation. The Chinese were so impressed, and they haven't excavated very few tombs. It's not like Egypt where they've been all robbed and pillaged. They haven't been in China. They have a different cultural society that really protects them and reveres them. So here was this formulation that this emperor said was the best of all of them. So they traced it back, and they found out there were a couple of men that were using this formulation and a couple of other things with it, but primarily this. And they lived to about, well, both of them close to 250 years. And and it was one after another. One was the successor to the other one. And so it was the thing that made the Chinese believe about it. And when I started this, we're talking about 1988. So when I started into this, the Chinese were very impressed about it. There was no internet, anything like that. Luckily, I think the Lord blessed me, and somebody came in and told me about it that had been to China, Korean. And he said this formulation they're testing on animals, and it's doubling the lifespan of all the animals we're testing it on. And even older animals are going back more youthful. And so he said, the Chinese doing a lot of big testing on it. And I said, yeah, but to me at that time, see, I wasn't really involved in nutrition. I thought, oh yeah, ancient Chinese secret, this magic formulation from China. But I thought of one thing. So this is where logic and reason sometimes can overcome prejudice or bias, whatever your emotional thinking is. And I thought, well, you know what? The one thing about these people that had lived so long, first one was Lai Zhan, and he lived 239 years. And then the other one was, I've forgotten how to pronounce his name now. But anyway, he lived like 246 years. And so, and the last one died in 1939. And we have pictures, and I think maybe you've seen that of him. And he went through, oh, God, lots of wives. I guess he didn't want them on the formulation, but I mean, it was like 15 or 20 wives, a lot, because he just outlived them all as he went through. So, but I thought one thing, and the Chinese were talking about it so much because if there's one country in the world that has never lost the information that they have accumulated since their beginning, it was China. Now, if you look at other countries, the Roman Empire, most of their information is lost. The Egyptian period, most of that is lost. If you look at some of the great civilizations, the Huns, Genghis Khan, the Mongols, all of that, when they went through and they defeated these other countries, and even the Arabic countries, and even the Ottoman Empire was really bad that way, is out of, I don't know what it was, just caught up into the nature of pillage and conquering things to where they destroyed almost everything. They even burned the great library in Alexandria in Egypt, which had phenomenal things in it that's been recorded, but lost forever. But in China, even India's had that. India has a big natural medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, but their dynasties were destroyed time and time again, and much of that knowledge was lost. A lot of it is continued in it, but the Ayurvedic medicine can be very powerful in some ways. But Chinese medicine, myself, in my opinion, I think most people that really look at it, was far advanced to any in the world, and it built upon it through all of these generations. So if you can imagine, 5,000 years ago, they wrote a book, the Yellow Emperor's book, which was a compilation of all the natural medicines that they had developed up to that time. That's pretty significant. And then it went through all of the periods of time with that. And these Chinese herbalists, physicians, they were herbalists too. And both of them were herbalists to emperors. But for some reason, the emperors didn't seem to get this long lifespan. But I think a lot of it was, if you look at some things that happened in history, a lot of corruption, a lot of death, a lot of murders and overthrows. And for some reason, the emperors got the idea that mercury would lead to immortality. So they took large amounts of mercury and, of course, killed quite a number of them, they think, with that. So I'm giving you too much here. But the one thing they did in Chinese medicine that impressed me so much was that these Lai Zhan and his predecessor, they both had all their achievements and everything recorded. And it said when they when Lai Zhan hit 150 years old, they had his birthday party. If you can imagine that, he had a 150-year-old birthday party. And it wasn't what was found in the emperor's tomb with the formulations. They just went back and it just locked into him. He was the person that had developed it. And so here he was, and they could go back into that time period. And there it was, his daily, monthly, yearly history was there. So that impressed me enough, and I'm increasing this monologue too long, but it impressed me enough that I thought there's got to be some value. Now the Chinese have got legitimate double-blind clinical testing going on, and with that, they're having great results. So I was like some of you that were there, and I was able to get the formula. It hadn't been ever put out into the Western world, so I was able to send somebody to China, which at that time people just really couldn't go to China, but I had a Chinese connection here. He went and met with their medicine works, they call them. And so he went to the Hangzhou Medicine Works #2, and he talked with them about negotiating for that formula with me, and they agreed to discuss it. So he got some product, brought it back to me, and now here I am. I have it in my hands that I think I looked at it, and first of all, I was in skincare, hair care, things of that nature, industrial chemicals. And I thought, I have a tough time believing it worked. I was the kind of person in my thinking at that time that you got about all the things you needed from the food that you ate. And while there's a lot of things in the food, of course, that you wouldn't survive without the food, but I didn't think you needed a supplement because of it. But the whole then that was the thinking back there in the 80s. And so as I looked at this, I looked at their studies, and the studies were telling how it was working to the degree that they knew how to do it at that time. But the one thing they did say from the ancient record, which they had validated with their testing, particularly their animal testing, was that, and then into people. And the thing that was most relevant with their human test was the fact is it says you have a greatly increased stamina, and you're resistant to fatigue and being tired. You have more endurance. You sleep less, and you awake more refreshed. Well, I wasn't so old in 1988. I'm still not so old. I'm growing younger. But nonetheless, I thought, you know what? If I had more strength and stamina, didn't fatigue as much, and if I could sleep less and awake more refreshed, man, I'd like that. So no matter what all the scientific information was within the studies that I had, which had been translated into English, which was quite an accomplishment for that time. But nonetheless, I thought, I want those things. So when the products were brought back to me, I started on them. And I went, probably like the testimony you had here, I went about 2 weeks. And then it was on me. I started waking up 2 hours earlier at night, and I had strength and stamina and endurance. It was noticeable. There was no placebo effect. I'm too analytical. I don't have a placebo effect with it. So I was really quite surprised. So I decided what I'm going to do now is I'm going to conduct my own animal tests. So I gave some of it to my ex-wife, and she started taking it. And after about 2 weeks, I will tell you, we're laying there in bed. This is when we shared the same bed, but I won't go through all that stuff. But anyway, we're laying there in bed, it's pitch black, and she could sleep until 10 every morning. And here I was waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and I'd normally sleep to 8 or something like that. But it was about 5 or 6 in the morning, pitch black, and I thought I was awake. I was just laying there, so I didn't disturb her because she's getting upset with me for getting up so early all the time from then on, but I just couldn't sleep. So I was laying there, and suddenly out of the dark, she says, "Are you awake?" Holy cow, was I awake? It about scared me so much I about jumped out of bed with it. I said, "Yeah, I am." She said, "Me too." And so it had built up within her. The same thing that we're happening here now with us. And she went into that shorter sleep pattern with it. So then I was convinced. So that put me on the road, and I'm giving you too much background here. I keep apologizing for that. But that's how I was, and I produced that product, became one of the best sellers within New Ace, my previous company. And I went there, I contracted exclusively for the formulation, and I had a lot of people trying to get it because of what was happening within New Ace, and people were using the product, even company employees trying to steal the formulation, and because it's such a hot item. But anyway, I went through and continued with it, and when I left New Ace, I still had a big supply of it when I sold the company, because I thought I'd be on it forever. But then along comes Dr. David Sinclair in Harvard Medical School, and I think most of you recognize it's the premier medical school in the world. Next, Mayo Clinic's right next to it in its ability to conduct clinical research on the scale of the highest credibility. So anyway, then Dr. David Sinclair, he was an Australian, by the way, from Brisbane, and he had been looking at some of these natural medicines, and he went to Harvard and was heading up their medical school there. So he's a brilliant individual. And with that, as he looked through, you understand that in pharmaceuticals, about half of them were found in nature first as a natural medicine. And then when they bring them out as a drug, you can't patent the natural ingredient. So have to make a synthetic molecule, which will elicit the same response as the natural medicine does, but it's a whole different molecular structure, an unnatural one, so it doesn't occur in nature, so they can be patented. So he was going through natural medicine, as lots of research centers do. And in spite of the fact, you might think of this for in your sales and marketing, in spite of the fact that a lot of people always try to discount natural medicine, dietary supplements, and pharmaceutical companies are aggressive against it, and big medicine. Just consider this one question, or ask someone that's talking about this one question. If they think it doesn't work, why do the big pharmaceutical companies have PhD biochemists in the jungles of the Amazon and in the Congo and out on the Tibetan plateau and all of the into China and into India? Why do you think they're paying massive amounts of money for those people to be out there? It's because they're trying to find out what had evolved over our 10 or 15,000 years of civilization that native populations knew that did something. And when they find out what it is, then they will take it, bring it back, test it to make sure that it does work, find out what the active ingredient is. And once they've proven that it's successful, that information only leads them to the point of this is what needs to be done, this is how it's working, and they have to find a synthetic molecule that can elicit the same response. But the big thing, as you all know, with prescription drugs comes horrendous side effects because they're not compatible with the human body. Yeah, they might elicit that response, but they trigger a lot of other things too, which they really don't care. And so as a result, they go through, and when they get a new drug approval now, it costs about, here in the United States, costs about $2 billion and takes about 15 years to get. And people complain about that, and the FDA, well, the FDA is regulating it, and Big Pharma wants them to because they get a patent on it for 20 years. So they're willing to pay the price and that tremendous expense to go all those years of research. But you got to realize for the 15 years getting a drug approval, there may have been 5 or 10 years in natural medicine. So the medicines that are coming out today that have a certain effect are discovered 20, 25 years ago, many of those in nature. Now that maybe gives you some information so that you can broaden your perspective a little bit in talking to people about that. So, but here Dr. Sinclair went back and found this ingredient, and I don't know the whole mechanism behind how he did it all with it, but he found the ingredients that did this. And so he started to research to see what could be done, because science has developed so much now over the last 30 or 40 years that total knowledge of science in the world of biochemistry doubles every 5 years. So just for easy figures, if you looked at, I started in this thing in 1988, but let's just say for easy figuring, it's 1990. And so by 1995, it doubled. By 2000, it doubled again. So it went from 2 to 4. And then by 2005, it went to 8. By 2010, it was 16. By 2015, it was 32. By now, it's 64. So we have over 60 times the knowledge we had when I first started. So now they can do much more sophisticated research. They can look at the inner functions of the cell, which was utterly impossible to do much of anything back. But now they can look at it, and they don't know all, but they know a lot of the processes go on and how they work. So Dr. Sinclair came on, and he determined that one of the big things that this did was sirtuin gene activity. And so sirtuin genes are the green genes that grow you. There's 7 of them, the SIRT genes, SIRT1 through SIRT7. And when they're activated, you're really growing. They found out part of this compound that he found, which is out of Chinese knotweed, they also found out it was the ingredient in red wine, and they were activating SIRT1 gene and SIRT2. And so when that happened, he was developing a pharmaceutical product out of it. He sold the information to GlaxoSmithKline, the pharmaceutical giants, for $720 million. That's just the research that Harvard Medical School did, and sold it to them so they could make a synthetic version of this molecule that they could patent. So if you can imagine the research that was on, that if GlaxoSmithKline spent that kind of money, because the potential power of immortality or getting anywhere close to it in a product has been the holy grail of fantasy, and snake oil and all of those things, but no one really thought it could happen. And now they're finding out it might not be able to fully happen, but you certainly can go a long ways down that road now to where you would have been dead and gone long before. So they paid $720 million, and then they didn't want to have to go through all that research, which he had done for about 10 years. And they went off to try and make the synthetic version of it. Well, they finally gave up. They just gave up a couple of years ago because they couldn't make a synthetic molecule that would do the same thing. But anyway, Dr. Sinclair was a pretty smart guy and brilliant guy. And so he started looking at the cert gene activity, and he said, well, it's only doing one, hitting one, cert one very strongly, cert two somewhat. So what about the other cert genes? What did they do? So he started researching it from the intercellular standpoint, and he found out there's a molecule that this one can develop, and some other compounds can develop, that activates all 7 cert genes, and that molecule is what we call NAD plus. The plus is for hydrogen charges on it. And they researched that and found spectacular results for coming with NAD, but it is horrendously expensive to extract NAD. So they started looking at the cells make it. You're all making it. It doesn't matter how old you're making it. It's just when you get old, you're not making much. And so they started to extract it and develop it. And out of that, they developed precursors. In other words, precursor can lead to that. It's one of the steps in it. You can think it simplistically, like you could say calcium builds strong bones. That's one term with that type of thing. So based on that equation, they looked at precursors that would lead to the production increase of NAD plus. They could also make NAD plus, but the price was terribly high. So out of that, they found some precursors, some pathways. They found the normal ways the cells were doing it. They were doing it out of natural compounds that were there. The primary one was varieties, different types of the vitamin B3 with it. And that's niacin basically to start with, and there are a lot of other forms of it. Niacinamide is more effective, of course. And then they reacted niacinamide with ribose and got niacinamide riboside. They found that was effective precursor, and it produced NMN, which produced NAD. Hope you followed all this. Maybe I'm wasting too much time explaining all this, but I get to where I like to have people like yourself that are really interested.
Tom, I'll tell you, you're leading us right down the path. I love it. Everybody's going to love exactly how you're saying it. So just don't worry about that.
All right. Well, thank you. And I could hear somebody snoring. I thought it was you on it, Doc. But anyway, I'll continue on and go with it, because out of that, they found out that in the studies that they were doing, that it would activate the genes, and it worked pretty good for a while. But the one thing that it did do, it was activating the genes so it burned more glucose, and which was that's the gasoline of the engine. The mitochondria is like a car engine. It takes an oxygen and glucose, explodes it with a spark, and releases the energy through oxidation. Well, that's how a car runs. Takes in gasoline, which is like glucose, and oxygen, and explodes it with a spark. Oxidizes gasoline. Your cells are oxidizing glucose, and so as a consequence, the energy is released. But just like with gasoline, after the explosion is done, the things are oxidized, and they're very harmful, can kill you, and they go out the exhaust pipe into our environment. Well, the same thing happens with the cells. They produce this energy, and the byproduct of glucose metabolism is that it creates free radicals, oxidizers, and so your cells start to have a bombardment of that's very high. Now we have a lot of new types of molecules that are free radicals too coming in that our bodies have the inability to metabolize because these are synthetic molecules, and so we haven't evolved to do that. So they can do a great deal of harm also with it. Now I'm telling you to keep that in mind because I'm going to lead you to a couple of things that can give you some good conclusions on what you're doing. So anyway, as that happens, if you take a piece of steel and you put water on it, it causes oxidation. There's no spark, but it is oxidized. And of course, oxidation corrodes steel where it becomes rust and just collapses to nothing. Well, the same thing happens in the biological structures within the cell, is the oxidation that isn't neutralized starts oxidizing those surfaces. And those, not just the surfaces, but the organella within the organ itself, the different parts. And as a result, they start breaking down. Now, to give you a perspective on this, a single cell, like a stem cell, which has so much activity, more so than a regular cell, takes about 500,000 oxidative hits a day. Can you imagine that? That means there are 500,000 free radicals that hit that cell to oxidize it. So the bodies produce a lot of the enzymes, superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione. And when that happens, they intercept and neutralize those. But with age, they can start getting oxidized too, and their amounts go down. So the oxidation damage keeps accumulating and destroying more and more tissue. So everything is slowing down dramatically. The other thing that happens is they oxidize glucose. Glucose becomes glucose oxide. And that is very sticky, and it starts coating. It attaches to protein structures and coats them. It is exactly the same principle that happens within your mouth when you're eating sugars and things like that, and it forms plaque, tartar on your teeth. And so that process is from bacteria, which are oxidizing the glucose and releasing, the byproduct is plaque, which accumulates on your teeth. Now you can brush it off every day, can't you? If you don't, can you imagine what happens after a while? You've got bad decay, bad serious tooth problem with it. So within the internal parts of the cell, in particular the stem cell, which is the mother cell that produces all the other cells, and I think you already know all that. But anyway, within the stem cell, this is intracellular plaque, and it's called glycation. And so these glycation is the accumulation of oxidized glucose. That's where the name comes from. So as it starts attaching to these protein surfaces, it's very sticky and they can't function. These things are function. They have to create reactions that are taking place from one compound to another, to another, to another, all through the stem cell, and the very processes of making it work, and the very processes of producing all of the different components that makes up the replacement cell that is going to divide and release to go into the cells that are wearing out in other parts of your body. And of course, the difference is those cells don't have telomeres, but stem cells do, because that is the you might think of it like feedstock that allows new cells to be built. So new cells take away from the telomeres of the stem cells, and then they go out and they just function as whatever they're doing in the lungs for breathing or muscles for strength, things like that. And as a consequence, the telomere units start going down within the stem cells. Now, they also, when they're creating this glucose, it gets sticky to the surfaces, but then it caramelizes. And so what that means is it's hardening. And so when it gets very hard, then the flexibility and the functionality has been plaqued over. And so now your cells aren't running so well. So here you come. This is where it comes back to you in whatever age you are with your lifestyle and your genetics and things like that. So you sit here at a certain point and you're plaqued up to a large degree. And the longer you live, the more plaque you have. So the way that the product works, that is NAD, it comes through and it activates the sirtuin genes. The sirtuin and it also activates mitochondria. Mitochondria is where the glucose is oxidized, and you have hundreds of those in your cell, little engines. And so now they're oxidizing more and more and giving you more and more energy, but they're also producing a lot more plaque, a lot more glucose, or oxidized glucose, so glycation. So it now starts filling up even faster, and you have body's natural mechanisms to remove it, but they get overpowered with age and they wear out just like anything else does. And so your plaquing accumulates more and more so. So there's one big problem you have. Science has found it, but no one's really brought out anything to work to remove the glycation. So if you're creating a lot of energy with NAD, but your surfaces are plaqued up with that tartar-like film on it, then they're not going to function well at all. And so for all of this energy, you may get a burst, you might feel better, you might have some of those things done, but you filmed over the surfaces to where and it's gotten hard and builds up more and more, especially with this super increase in energy. So you start doing that, and your functionality goes down. The second thing is the purpose of a stem cell, and we're going to talk particularly about stem cells because they have to take in, it's like building a house. There's a lot of materials that you have to take into a house to build it: electrical, plumbing, concrete, wood, paint, flooring, all kinds of things, that roofing, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same thing with producing a new cell. There are many different types of chemical components that make a cell. It isn't just like you eat a lot of protein, you produce a lot of cells. There's many other factors involved in that cell. They all have to get into the stem cell, and they have to go through the metabolic processes where they're combined and converted from one to another by the organella within the stem cell, stem cell organ, if you will, or cell. And so as a result, with that, as they produce the material to build a new cell, then there's waste. There's byproducts from this metabolism. And just like if you build a house, one of the big things you got to do when you're done is clean it up, because there's ends that are cut off wood, there's pieces of concrete, there's everything laying around, and so you have to remove all of that. Well, your stem cells have portals in them. Regular cells do too, but the portals are openings, and so as this metabolic process takes place within the body, you've got your glycation for energy, but now you have metabolic processes going on, and as they make a compound out of a number of different compounds, they use some of it, and some of it is now become cellular garbage, and they call that lipofusion. The reason they call it lipo is that means it's fat loving, and fusion means it bonds together. So this lipofusion that comes out starts, since it's fat soluble, that means it's not water soluble, and the cells, the cytoplasm within the cells, are water. And so now you have this lipid that's in the water, in hydro, and it isn't soluble. So it'll float around and get excreted out the portals. But the problem is, remember, the second part of it is lipofusion. So what it does is like attracts like, and it starts bonding to other pieces of lipofusion. And so this cellular garbage, a lot of it gets out the portals, but if it's a matter of size and of course processes to excrete it, but as the molecules start adhering to each other, they become too big to get out of the portals. Then they start starting to block the portals, and they keep building up bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you look at a person or an animal that is getting to middle or older age, that lipofusion is building up, and it's like a thick sludge in there instead of a watery consistency of the cytoplasm. And now it makes it very difficult to get in things even like oxygen or nutrients to make the cells run. And of course, if you speed up the mitochondria with NAD, you're producing a lot more lipofusion, and that which used to get out now doesn't. And so you start even the cells go from a clear white. They're like really like an egg, with the yolk would be the nucleus, and then the cytoplasm around it. And so that clear cytoplasm now starts to discolor, gets yellow, and then goes to brown, and it traps so many toxins within it that it holds, that it does great deal of damage with it. So now you're plaqued up with glycation, you're sludged up with lipofuscin, and you're producing a lot of energy, but the energy keeps leaving more byproducts of combustion, of oxidation, more byproducts, lipofuscin from metabolic processes that go on, and they start plugging up everything. Now, it does it so bad that the cell now starts to lose its definition, and it looks like instead of it being smooth, it now starts taking on the shape of, it actually, like you would crinkle up and wad up a piece of paper. And that's what it looks like within it. And even the nucleus, which is normally round like the yolk and a egg, becomes also distorted, and it looks like a crinkled up piece of paper. And by that time, you're about ready to put jam in your pockets because you're toast. You haven't got much time left. And so with that, that's where you're sitting at the stem cell. So now they come in, they have this burst of energy. As that happens, then things are more efficient within the cell, but the accumulation builds up. And what they're finding now, and I'm talking to you about some of these things that are in theory, but because they're in theory, and they're in theory until they become reality. Well, that's the mission of what I do. I research the research to find out what is there and how to get it out and made, and to turn the theories into reality for what we're doing. So now what they're seeing is the sirtuin genes that were there, that were creating the energy, they start getting plaqued within it. And as a result, the NAD plus isn't as effective because it's blocked. And so you can understand that, because this is when an NAD comes in contact with the sirtuin gene, that energy that's there, there's the electronic signal that's passed on. That signal is actually hydrogen. That's why the NAD has the plus sign with it, because that's a hydrogen neuron and electron that's attached to it. And so that activates because of the structure of NAD. It's like putting the key in the lock. If it's not cut right, it won't go in the lock. If it is, it slips in and turns. So that happens. But as it gets plugged up, then it starts bouncing off, and things like that start to happen. So that, and I'm only theorizing here, so hypothetically thinking that you start to, even though you feel this burst, to get there, and this comes back to your original question there, to get there, you might start in and you're getting some NAD, but your system is to the point of where it's glycated up enough and has enough lipofuscin in it that you're not getting as much of a response. So as it's dose dependent, if you start increasing the amount of it, you go from 3 twice a day to 4 or to 5 or to 6 twice a day, then what you're doing is you're creating a lot more NAD plus, and as a result, you're getting a lot more biological activity. You can feed it, you can feel it, and then as you start, you're working in a very contaminated environment within the stem cell, and it only gets worse with that kind of thing. So that's what happens. So now, along what we're doing is there's also, this is very complex, but I think you can tell I've got it in my mind and I understand it. So anyway, as this kind of thing happens, you have the cells that have a turnover rate. And when you create a new cell, of course, that takes some telomere units. And so every time you create a new cell from the stem cell, it loses telomeres. And now what they found out is that how often a cell duplicates and replaces itself is done by NAD and cellular activity, but it has to be ignited. It's called an igniter or an activator, and they have to be ignited. The stem cell does. There's a mechanism that tells it divide, create a new cell and divide, and that's regulated by the telomeres. So as your telomere units are being used up to make new cells over your lifetime, the length of them starts to go down. You're born with about 10,000. Now, when at conception, you have 15,000. 9 months later, you've lost 5,000 of the units. It's taken that much to go from one cell to, 20, 30 trillion cells. So as a result, that takes a lot of telomere units. But once you're grown, you're down to about, and it maintains it from birth to about 18 or 20 years old. You're maintaining your telomere units because you're producing a lot of the compound telomerase, which is actually what makes a cancer cell immortal, because it just keeps the cells dividing and dividing and dividing. So with that, you are losing telomere units, and it tells that it's the igniter, so it doesn't ignite as often. So as a result, you're producing less cells with that. And of course, you have less cells, you have less energy, all those kinds of things. You start losing brain volume, muscle mass, all of those types of things. Systems start wearing out because the old cells are being worn out and discarded, and you're not replacing them with the same quantity you're losing. So that's what aging is. It's a matter of decay and degeneration. So if we can end the decay and we can increase regeneration above degeneration, you've effectively ended aging. Now, if you do it right and long enough, you can start growing younger with it. So we're all on that pathway, but there's a number of factors, and that's why I'm explaining it to you. And I like dealing with you Aussies because you have a mind and a desire to learn this, where in a lot of the different cultures, they just want to know the benefit. Oh yeah, I've taken this, I feel better, or I do this or that. But you want to know more, and perhaps in some ways the selling people want to know about feature and benefits rather than features. But if you're sharp enough to put the combination between the two and use them effectively, sell the benefits, support it with the features, you can be much more effective in what you're doing. So anyway, now that your telomeres are being depleted, when you get down from that 10,000 you had that were maintained, as you're grown, it's sort of an evolutionary process, the way that God created us, in that we grow to adulthood, we have our children, and once we're out of the childbearing years, and of course, you see things start to accelerate even more so towards aging, and everything's slowing down. There's becoming less of you. Of course, you might be more fat, but that's not really the muscle mass. You can have a skinny person with a lot of fat, and so your BMI starts going down negatively for you as you get older. Then you see people that are in 60s and 70s and even 80s, and they're emaciated. Where they used to have decent biceps and muscles, they become skin and bone in what they're doing with all of that. And that all has to do with lack of regeneration. So stem cells do the regeneration, but they're told when to do it with the telomeres that are on it. So here's some scientists, I don't know how many years ago it was, probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they discovered they were doing cancer cell research, and they found out cancer cells are immortal. And that they have cancer cells from the 1800s that are still growing in petri dishes or within atmospheres within laboratories. And from the 1800s, they just get bigger and bigger. They have to destroy them after a while because they just keep, or some of them, because they just keep duplicating and never stop duplicating and do it at a very fast rate. So in cancer research, what they found was they do it because the DNA gets broken through oxidation, and so the cell has lost its ability to control duplication. And what happens is the cell is trying to repair itself, that damaged DNA, and in doing so, it produces a lot of the telomerase, and the telomerase isn't really fixing the DNA, but what it's doing is it's rebuilding the telomere units. So now a cancer cell produces a new cell, and there's no loss in telomeres because it's building it back just as fast as it was. And as cancer cells produce new cells, you got to remember they're all fresh cells that come out. They're not contaminated with a lifetime of accumulation. So cancers just start growing faster and bigger and all those other kinds of things. So they're figuring out, trying to how to shut off telomeres. or telomerase. But they didn't know the mechanism of what was going on. As they found out is if they could shut off the telomerase, the cells deteriorated really badly and started to age quickly, and then had an earlier cell death. So that, well, that's not the answer to it, because you might solve that one issue for a cancer cell, but it'll kill you because it's going to do that through all the cells in your body. So then some researchers, 3 of them in particular, had the idea, well, what about if they looked at, and this is where science has evolved enough to now know what we couldn't even conceive before. They said, well, now if a normal cell, their telomerase is way down, so how about if we increase it as it becomes cancerous? And there was thoughts pro and con one way or another on it, but they increased the telomerase, and what they did is, as the telomerase increased telomere lengths, it started dividing more, and actually you built your telomeres back, and it didn't create a cancer cell because the DNA was not damaged. So it started making more cells like when you were younger, duplicating. The problem lied in the fact of cellular contamination from things like glycation, oxidative damage, rusting, and the lipofuscin that was within it. I hope that's comprehensive enough for you to understand. So as a consequence, telomere units have a lot to do with what this is. So rebuilding the telomeres makes it right. And so if you can increase the NAD so it duplicates fast, you can have telomeres there, so it's telling it to create more cells. Of course, you're going to have a lot more energy with it. But if it's plaqued up with glycation, and if it's so full of sludge that it's thick and oily and materials can't get through, and damages are rusted away because your oxidation assault is tremendous on the cell. Now, the more the cells duplicate, the worse that becomes. With it, mitochondria wear out. And when they wear out, those are the energy engines in it. Then they start leaking very toxic oxidizers, oxidative stress, that do tremendous amounts of damage to the cells. So all of these things, because of wear and tear, come on, and they start accumulating, and of course everything goes down. Now here's where we're back to the age pill. You increase NAD plus, you're going to get a burst of energy because you're going to have more faster cell division, but your telomeres run out. So then it sort of over a period of time starts being counterproductive to that too. The other thing that happens with producing NAD, and this is a point you might even want to write down with it, there's a process that it has to go through to create the energy, and it's called methylation. So methylation is a critical part of health and energy. And what they think happens with a lot of people is that as you increase your NAD, you have certain methyl reserves that are within your body, and they're in every cell of your body in the biological processes, but your methylation starts damaging your reserves. So the methyl donors that you have, or the methyl that is in the unit to be used with NAD for methylation, becomes depleted. And so now the NAD over a period of time, since you're depleted, goes down and down and down with it. And they're now fighting. So these things we're talking about right here, Dr. Sinclair and others at other institutions found the same thing. Methylation is so important to make the NAD work, because if it really gets working well, you feel that big burst of energy, but then you run out of your reserves of methyl. And so it becomes more sluggish because it can't be as energetic as it was before. So here we have a formulation that now within our formula for the age pill, it removes glycation. It removes lipofuscin. So, and then it increases NAD. So those are all good positive steps. And if you're doing all that, but you're running out of methyl donors, there's a good chance that your energy levels could start falling off due to that. So there's some things you can do with that that are very good. And in fact, actually some very inexpensive natural things. But if you're really on this, if you want to live for a long time, you're going to have the types of nutrients that make the biological processes happen, aren't you? So as a result, you need to take more methyl donors into your body. And the best way to do that, if you don't want to do it with a supplement, you can do it with supplements. You can just look for something that is a methyl donor. Methyl folate is a very good one with it. In fact, it works a lot better than folic acid, which actually has. So, and of course, you use that for spinal bifida. But methylfolate works even better than folic acid does. And with if you take folic acid, there's some side effects that come from that, and I won't go through all of that now. But if you took a methylfolate supplement and in the recommended amounts, you could be providing the methylization processes with the methyl that it needs to run with NAD. So that's one thing. If you want to do it an even more inexpensive way, and methylfolate, but there's other methyl formulations which are also very effective. There's a methyl that is from a vitamin B complex, but since part of it is arsenic, monocle people shy away from that, cobalamin, methylcobalamin. But in reality, the arsenic is stable, but I don't want to fight that fight with it. So, but anyway, you can find anything that is methyl something, and you can add it as a diet or something if you want to take it. But if you want it from food, there are some foods that are really rich in it, and the very best one that there is broccoli. Nothing is better than broccoli for providing large amounts of methyl to your body. Another one's very good is Brussels sprouts, spinach, asparagus, avocados are extremely good. All of those, if you want to just include those regular in your meals, you can be getting enough methyl without doing anything else anyway. For me, I'm lucky because some people don't like broccoli, some people don't like spinach. I love them. My taste buds are right for them. But even if it isn't, after a while, you'll get to like them. Your taste buds acclimate to it if you're one. But, there's a lot of people that eat it. There's lots sold in the stores. So here you have some easy ways to get your methyl reserves up high enough just by having dark leafy vegetables, at least one meal a day, I'd say. Or at my house, I try to keep avocados there. I like them, and I just cut an avocado at night and half, and I just sit there and might watch the news and have a spoon and just eat an avocado. And so it's easy to do if you want to do those things. Now, all those things come together, but you got to rebuild your telomere units. So in rebuilding telomere units, there's TSX is the best compound that does that. And these people that discovered this, and then they turned around and found out that if you increase telomerase, then cells can duplicate indefinitely. And when you get down on telomere units, well, you had 10,000 at birth, 10,000 when you're about 20. When you get down to between 5,000 and 6,000 units, then it is so low that the disease that's going to kill you kills you. And somewhere along that range, you'll notice some people that get the disease that kills them starts happening somewhere around their 50s. And the reason why after 20, you're losing, there's a lot of other factors too, but you lose, there's really quite a synergistic alliance between the fact that you lose about 8 to 10% of your telomere units every 10 years. It's also the same thing with stem cells. They're in stages of senescence. In other words, they're becoming dormant when they become senescent, but senescence is a decline with them, and you lose 8 to 10% of your stem cell activity also every 10 years. So if you look at that and you do a quick equation with it, let's say that you had 10,000 units, and by 30, let's just do it by 10. So you lost 10%. So now you're down to 9,000. By 40, you're down to 8,000. By 50, you're down to 7,000. By 60, you're down to 6,000. And somewhere between there and 5,000 units, you're going to die. And it's not that you necessarily, a lot of these diseases can be just like when you're younger. You don't get these things because of your your overall health. But since those things have gone down, since cell duplications goes down, it allows whatever your environment is or your genetic predisposition is to develop the disease that's going to kill you. And so aging leads to death. And people don't die of old age. They age, they die of decay and degeneration. And now they've mapped the human genome, and they know you have the ability with your genetic code, everything's operating right, to live to be 150. So if you die in your 70s or 80s, you're dying at middle age. But nobody dies of middle age. You die of decay and degeneration. So if we can end the decay and increase the regeneration above the degeneration rate, you're going to end aging. And if you increase it enough, you're going to start growing younger. And that's the philosophy of which we have. So to increase telomere units, TSX is the best. But I will tell you one thing that's also important to consider. I use TSX every day. And you can buy those in units. It's kind of expensive. The other company uses the same technology that we're using, and their product's $500-600 a month. They sell it through doctors, and it's a natural ingredient. And they've really come after me seriously, but because they have a use patent on it. It's a natural ingredient, but they have a use patent for saying it increases telomerase. Well, that's the patent. So they come after me because I'm using the same ingredients. In fact, they're using 1, and I'm using 4. I'm using 3 that they don't have, plus the 1 they do, and I'm using it in higher levels than they are, and still our sales for 80% less than what theirs does, or 90% less. Still, costs I don't know US dollars, but anyway, to Australian, but it's still costing $100 US. So even we bought some in quantity. We got some promos where you can buy it together, and I think you've seen that, to get a discount and get it down. But the thing about it is they sued us on it, and they tried to, but never got to court because you're not watching all our our literature. We don't say it increases telomerase, or it causes a greater increase in telomerase to be produced. What we say is it supports long telomeres, and supporting long telomeres does not say that it does it by increasing telomerase. There's also a thing that telomeres degenerate quite fast too. So smokers have always got a lot shorter telomeres than other people do, because the oxidative damage to smoke is very damaging to telomere units. Just think of them like seeds on sunflowers. Every time a cell is stem cell produces a new cell, takes a seed out to do it. So after a while, you get more and more holes in it, and that type of thing. That's maybe an easy way for you to visualize it, to think about it. So anyway, if you take TSX, now you're going to increase your telomerase, so the ignition rate of cell duplication will be even higher. And if we can clean up the glycation in the plaque, then we can really regenerate youth and energy and all of those things. But there's even more factors than that. The other thing that's important is you need to understand your brain is only about 1/2 to 2% of your body weight, but it uses 20 to 30% of all your oxygen. It's because so many calculations are going on, and with that, when you have that much energy, it oxidizes a lot of glucose. That causes a lot of plaque, causes a lot of oxidative stress in the brain, which rusts the brain out. And brain cells aren't being duplicated as fast because of the lack of telomeres, because they're getting used up. Stem cells, which are every 220 or so different types of stem cells throughout our body that make solid tissues. And so the stem cells that are making brain, they start wearing out. The mitochondria, with all that huge increase in metabolic activity, get burned out quick, and you get to a certain point and see your mental processes start falling off fast. So what I've done is I've developed brain vitality. Brain vitality comes in, and it feeds the brain with super nutrients that it needs to function at its optimal range. And with it, it can regenerate. The brain blood barrier keeps a lot of things from going through. And as you get older, there's more damage and things like that to it. But there's ways of achieving that. And I've done that with brain vitality, and magnesium is one of the most important energy parts of the energy component within the brain. And so magnesium is very difficult. It's the most difficult element to get into the brain through the blood-brain barrier. So everybody is magnesium deficient in the brain, plus throughout the rest of our body. It just doesn't absorb well. That's why they have things like milk of magnesia. It's the laxative. You get so much of it, it just causes the your bowels to just a release, because it can't get through, and it stimulates the release, and so you have difficulties with that. But if you're constipated, well, take milk of magnesia. It works because magnesium is just causing that to happen. So anyway, with that, we have the most bioavailable form of magnesium that's been found, which literally only a few years ago was non-existent. They found it, and it's a natural one. We have that in there. We also have some things in there that are very powerful to support the body's natural mechanism. That's how I have to say it. If it supports it, we don't have to tell how it does it. But we have powerful support precursors and things like that in the brain to support the systems that fights Alzheimer's and also dementia. So with that, you're getting a lot. And then we have the materials in it. What's brain tissue made out of? We have that type of thing. You can talk about that to support the building of more and stronger and better brain cells and neurons, connections and everything, not only in your brain, but throughout the rest of your body. So if you take brain vitality, you get all that. But one other thing that's a byproduct of brain vitality is the compound that we use to support it, to actually support the body's mechanism to fight against Alzheimer's, actually supports telomerase production. Now we can talk about telomerase production because it's in a different thing and within the brain. So now it's not on the level of TSX, but it's a decent dose with it. So you're concerned about your brain anyway and getting oxidized away and all of those things happening in dementia. Well, all of us is going to get dementia, but now it doesn't have to be. Something like the Age product and brain vitality, I think, is going to eliminate or support the elimination of dementia and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's and dementia is totally preventable. And if you got it, studies show you can take dementia virtually all the way back, but with what? Well, you can do it in the lab. We can do it here right on your bathroom counter because of the things that we've got within brain vitality and the Age pill. So I'm giving you overload here on products, knowledge and things like that. But now you understand more. So if it's dose dependent, you go back and you start increasing your dosage. You go from 6 a day to 12 a day. Yeah, you're going to produce a lot more NAD. You're going to have a lot more glycation removal. You're going to have a lot more lipofuscin breakdown through enzymes, which causes it to become small enough molecular weight or size so that it'll go out the portals now and you start cleaning up. So you might be in a stage in life, if this is not cutting it for you, that by increasing it, now you speed up everything. If you just speed up NAD plus, I think you'd develop so much more glycation and or lipofuscin and glycation. But now with our formula, we're the only ones that I don't know. It's funny how people are. They look for one magic silver bullet, but it doesn't do everything. And the situation is much more complex than that. So what we've done is we've addressed all of those areas that are there. So now we have products to support glycation removal, lipofuscin breakdown and removal, NAD, which and actually now if you want to throw eternity into it, it actually goes to mitochondria. Now we have 23 chromosomes within our body, but mitochondria is different. It has its own chromosomes. It has 12 of them, not 23. And those 12 are because it has to be more simplistic, but it has to create huge amounts of energy with it. So they do wear out. They start leaking electrons. But now science has shown that these sirtuin activators can go in and they activate the gene sequence in mitochondria. So you do two things. Mitochondria that's wearing out just like an engine gets overhauled. Now NAD plus is doing that within the cell, but the ingredient resveratrol in our eternity goes through and supports the rebuilding, the overhaul of the engine and the mitochondria itself. And so then it also comes through, and NAD has a factor in that too, of now the number of mitochondria you have that are wearing out, it has the ability to repair and overhaul itself, which is an amazing thing to think of in the body. But now also it can increase the duplication rate of them significantly with resveratrol from eternity, and to a significant degree too with NAD plus. So all of these things start coming together. So your body's not a simple thing. The biological systems are quite complex. And so what was utterly impossible 10 years ago, 15 years ago, now it was only fantasy, it was science fiction, and hype and snake oil and all that stuff. Now those things are answers to them have been found, and we're providing them where no one else is doing so. So you have all of that, and then I'll just cut off the rest of this conversation and flip to the other one, is hydrogen. There'd be no life on Earth if it wasn't for sunlight. Well, what is sunlight? It comes down with certain bands of light. Those things are visible light, 30%, and then UV light, and that creates an oxidative a response to oxidation, which creates, it's called ROS, and this reactive oxidation species actually triggers you to make more antioxidants to combat it. But then infrared comes down. Infrared, there's a lot of wavelengths. Certain wavelengths grow grass and plants. Others actually can grow skin or hair with it. And so all those things are there, but those are all peripheral things, and you can see how important they are. But the major one is if there's a miracle molecule, it's hydrogen. And the sun is a ball of hydrogen. And so it flips back and forth within fractions of a second from hydrogen to helium, where it recharges and then it goes to hydrogen again. So back and forth, back and forth, back and forth like that. And when it hits hydrogen, big discharges go out from the sun, and it's continuous because it's so many times per second. And down to Earth comes all that hydrogen. When it hits plants, the chlorophyll through photosynthesis splits off that hydrogen, and it turns it, which is solar energy, into chemical energy, and makes many different forms of chemical energy, which goes through the whole process into our bodies. And when we eat the food, we take in all the nutrients that the plants or animals that we're eating have produced through the processes, but it all begins with hydrogen. And within it lies hydrogen molecule. And so the hydrogen molecule goes through and it supports many biological processes within the body. And it ultimately gets up and hits the plus sign on NAD in making it. And so at that point, it's converted into many different forms of chemical energy. But then when it goes into the mitochondria takes hydrogen, and the immense power of hydrogen. And remember this, there's many different types of atomic bombs they designed, but nothing has the immense power of hydrogen. Hydrogen has got the greatest energy within it. And since the sun's hydrogen, and you may not know this, but about 80% of the universe was made out of hydrogen. And many of the elements are just hydrogen neurons that have been neutrons that have been bombarded together to form gold or different things like that. So the universe is basically here with hydrogen. So it has an immense amount of power. So if you take the H2 stick, or if you have one of our hydrogen generating units there, you're putting hydrogen into the body, and hydrogen is the smallest atom in the universe. And when it forms together, it's unstable as H1, so it forms H2, or it combines with water form H2O. But if you got it as H2, it's solid, stable, and it'll go anywhere throughout your body. And with it comes the power of the sun within you. And so within the mitochondria, where it is converted into energy, it then releases the hydrogen that came from the sun, and scientifically they classify it as biological hydrogen. That is the last step that is required to be converted into electrical energy. So you get solar energy, chemical energy, then you get the elemental hydrogen released, which triggers electrical generation within the cell, within the brain, with everything. And we run by a carbon-based electrical system through every cell of our body is interconnected to almost every other cell and back to the brain. And in all of that process, and it all runs on electricity. If you could take the electrical charge away from your body, you'd instantly become just a pile of dust. That would be it. So that's how important it is. So as your hydrogen goes down, these different things, your energy levels go down. So if you put hydrogen into your system, now you have the power of the sun energizing your system. But hydrogen just doesn't do that. It does a lot of other things. It is having a huge effect on supporting the body's processes against things like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's within the brain, and rheumatoid arthritis, and vision and hearing, and all kinds of things like that. So all of that's coming together with hydrogen, plus it releases the electrical energy that drives your body. And the thing that happens with NAD, it has a hydrogen atom on it, and when it goes to the mitochondria and it releases that, now it's just NAD. It's not NAD plus anymore, and so the body gets rid of it. But science is now showing that if you have enough of the biological hydrogen within your body, that spent NAD, which takes a lot to produce it, now can be recharged and it can cycle again. And how many times it can cycle, nobody knows, but they know it can be recharged. They know it can cycle. So now you can see hydrogen can have a profound effect too. We're talking about a lot of products here, but we're talking about a lot of components and systems within your body, and you can use some or all. And some people say, oh, I can't afford to use it all. Well, that's why we have a business model where you can go out and get customers and other distributors and get your products for free. That's your first goal, to do it, reduce the price of them, get them for free. And then as other people are living longer, much healthier, feeling better, a lot of the things that they thought could never be done were only getting worse, health conditions now suddenly get better or are gone altogether, because the body has the ability to rebuild and maintain itself, regenerate, if you give it the proper nutrients and remove the toxins and the waste. And that very statement there is over 5,000 years old from China. They made that analogy back then, and it's still true. It's true today. It was true then. So what we're doing is we're fulfilling that with all the different ingredients we have to do that. So that covers a lot of what we're going to talk about. I'll tell you one last little thing. I'm sorry you've hung on for a long time, but I'm bringing in a product called Da Bomb. It's D and then BOMB. It's just no particular reason that I came up with it, but I thought of the name and I thought it was somewhat ingenious because of the biochemistry that I found. Because now here's something to consider, and you don't want to push us on, and don't want to put it really out in the field yet until we get there. And we got to learn how to say this thing right. But Harvard Medical School, who first isolated and determined what the NAD molecule, NAD plus, could do, calls it the immortality molecule. And I've got NASA using it, because when you go in space, solar radiation penetrates through the spaceship and through spacesuits or anything else, nothing to stop it. It pinholes you. It leaves all kinds of pinholes. And people go out from a year in space, come back 5 years older. And so they can do a mission to Earth, but if the mission to Mars is so long and coming and going, that everyone that goes out to Mars, nobody comes back because they're all killed by solar radiation. But because NAD plus repairs the mutagenic damage to the DNA, it'll repair it about as fast as it's happening. So Dr. Sinclair went to NASA and said, now you can send somebody to Mars, because with this natural supplement, you can repair the damage just as fast as it occurs, and everybody comes back. But instead of coming back dead or coming back older, they come back healthier and younger by using this product while they're gone. Well, that's pretty remarkable to think of. So they call it the immortality pill. the immortality molecule. But here, from out of almost like out of nowhere, like a meteorite coming in, is Mayo Clinic. You've all heard of it, how big they are. And they started looking at stem cells, and they're actually looking at cancer cells too, but this relates to stem cells. So as they looked at stem cells, they thought if you're losing 10% of them every 10 years, you're not losing them. They're in stages of deterioration or activity levels going down. So they're in senescence. And so when you get down to about age in your 60s, you're down to about 5% cellular activity from stem cells. And that's because about 95% of them or so, 95%, are now senescent. They're dormant, but they're not dead. And the problem with them is they create all the energy, but now when they are so non-functional, they start leaking the most dangerous, deadly molecule in your body, which is a reactive oxidation species that creates the cancers, does most of the diseases, and all of those things from this most dangerous of all the free radicals in your body, and your senescent stem cells are leaking them. Now, why does it do that? And scientists are kind of theorizing now. Of course, your immune system gets dumbed down and damaged with age, but they think they're trying to draw the immune system to it to kill the senescent cells, senescent stem cells. So regular cells that are produced by stem cells, of course, are discarded. They're not a problem, but stem cells are sort of eternal, and now they're eternally dormant, leaking all kinds of the most dangerous electrons, free radicals that are doing it. So they worked on it, and they have found something, which actually I had found before. I found it in new ways, and I hardly dare even mention what it is. They don't carry it anymore, and they have no idea what it did, but I found it 20 years ago. But now they've been working on it with the Mayo Clinic, and they have found a compound which creates a mechanism which is called apoptosis. Apoptosis is cell death. And if you can trigger apoptosis, and that's what they try to do with chemotherapy and radiation and other things like, well, radiation not so much, but they try to, with chemotherapies in particular and other types of therapies, that they have some now that turn the immune system on cancer, which is quite effective with what they do. Expensive, but quite effective. But anyway, as cell death, your immune system can go and click a receptor, if you think of it that way, a switch, and as a result, a senescent cell or a cancer cell can commit suicide, so to speak. It's the mechanism that causes them to die and to break down. So what they're looking for now, not necessarily as cancer, because that is such a big business for big pharma, big medicine. But what they're looking for, they don't want to address it necessarily now. They got to do it because this is natural compounds, extremely rare and difficult to make and get. But I got it 20 years ago. One of them, now there's one that's equally effective, I think, and even a little more diverse. I'm gonna try to use them both together. But what happens when you trigger a stem cell to go into apoptosis? Think of it like this: if you had a bud and it blossoms into a flower, and when the period of time is gone, it's gone dormant, the petals fall out and all that type of thing, and then with the cycling of the season, you'll produce another flower out of that bud, that kind of thing. That's why you can pick things like strawberries and raspberries that are coming out of this bud, and if you pick it off, it'll produce another one. Well, that's sort of simplistic way of thinking about it. But what the Mayo Clinic found out in their research is if you can create apoptosis in senescent stem cells, not necessarily ones that are in senescence, but senescent, and the body's trying to remove them. But that's why they think they're emitting all of this toxins, this reactive oxidative species, so it alerts the stem cell to come in and trigger apoptosis, and then it can devour the stem cell. So their approach on it is coming through and creating, with a natural compound, creating apoptosis in the senescent stem cells. And when that senescent cell commits suicide, dies, then the bud is still there. And what it looks like is they'll produce a new young stem cell to replace it. So can you imagine if you're at a certain point, you know, in your 40s, you're close to 50% dormant on stem cell activity. Your stem cell activity is down about 50%. And so with that, then it gets worse, 50, worse than 60, by 70, 2, 3, 4, 5% maybe. That's going on. But if suddenly wherever you're at, even at 40, if you could take something like this and the senescent cells all went into the apoptosis, of course they can't do it all at once because there's lots of them, but if they start going into apoptosis, they're going to be refreshed with new young stem cells. You're going to have much more activity, much more biological energy, much more regeneration, much more health, all of those kinds of things. So now they have a compound, and the Mayo Clinic is calling it the immortality molecule too. So here's two different types of molecules. One for apoptosis, which they say, well, we can bring back all of your stem cells. It's like the resurrection theory, that it comes back, suddenly they're restored to where they were. Well, not suddenly, it takes a period of time to do that, like when you're young. And now you come around with NAD, and you're working within the cells, you're cleaning them up, you're activating the energy, you're increasing duplication rate with telomeres. And now the ones that have gotten dormant, click, come off, and they'll produce new ones. And so now you have two major institutions, Harvard Medical School and the Mayo Clinic, both saying, we have the immortality molecule. Now, I don't think either one does it by themselves, but what is 1 and 1? It's not 2 when you put those things together. It is 100. It's 100%. And so as a result, they've done this, but they're looking at it now to try and find a synthetic version to bring it out as medicine. Well, goodbye 10 or 15 years while I try and do that and get it tested. Do you want to wait, or would you want something like that right now? I'm hot on the path and well down to that. I'm going to bring it out sometime this year I don't know if it'll be the final key. It probably won't, but I'm going to bring it out because you add that to it, my God, it's throwing gasoline on a bonfire. What are you going to get? You're going to get a blaze going so much. So that's coming for you. Now, I said that was the last thing, but I lied. I'm going to tell you one more little thing that I found. It's not one more little, it's one more big thing I found. Is to do the research, because there's so much going on. Just like hydrogen, there was 20 studies 3 or 4 years ago. Now there's over 1,000 because the people now realizing they're sophisticated enough to do it. Same with NAD+. But now here's the big one for you that answers the initial question that was put. Why do we go on it and then we start to fall down? Well, there are some things that happen that can make NAD much more potent. And I've changed the formula of Age Pill. I've kept the basic things in it, just added to it some other things to make it more functional, more powerful, more sustaining with it. I'm going to make another evolutionary change that's going to come out now sometime, hopefully before summer's over, but it all depends because I just didn't even tell you what I've done, but I've done the unthinkable, the undoable, and we're going to put it out in the Age Pill with that. But we've also, I can tell you part of this, what we found out is a way to take NAD with adding some other compounds to it, 2 other compounds with it, where it overcomes metabolic syndrome, which most of us, it's a sluggishness, it's a drain on your biology. Most of us have that, women particularly, even more so than men. But when you have metabolic syndrome, energy goes way down. And while NAD is increasing energy, I found a way to make it extremely powerful, even much more, even over and above what it is. And when that happens, some major things happen with it. Energy levels go right off the charts with it in the studies that they're doing. Glucose metabolism is really significant, and things that are like cholesterol levels, it just knocks the dog out of it with it. You're metabolizing so much LDL cholesterol and your or HDL cholesterol and your LDL cholesterol just falls right off. So cholesterol goes down, has a profound effect on things, or should have, on type 2 diabetes. Weight loss will just, it's be undeniable amounts of weight loss with it. And all the time you're building more lean muscle mass and tissue density throughout all of your body. And it's really powerful in helping with vision, as hydrogen now has been found. You can take hydrogen drops. What I do when I take my hydrogen in the day, I put drops in my eyes. After I've shaved, I rub it into the skin, the hydrogen water, and I drink it because it all has an enormous effect on it. Now, I have gone on, and I have given you more than the whole 9 yards here. And there's much more I could go on and on with, but I was supposed to be 20 minutes. Oh, God, my God. But since you are special leaders that are on this, and Doc and I, Kurt and I, have got a really good relationship together, he can call on me for these kinds of things to help and assist. And you can see what I'm doing. For some reason, God has blessed me with the kind of mind that I can research and develop these kinds of things. And just like one of you said early on the testimony, your mission is to help people to make their lives better. That is my mission in life. It's not money. It's not egotistical. I get really a lot of happiness in making people's lives become much better, healthier, happier, and wealthier with all of that. And that's what I'm dedicated to doing. So I'm sitting here without a note, and you can see I'm just extemporaneously talking. I know so much about this. I have a really a God-given ability in mind to be able to understand this, to comprehend it, put it together in a sequential thing where the total is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's a lot of what I've explained to you today. So my advice to you, double up with it. And if you're not on TSX or Brain Vitality, you darn well ought to be. You ought to be taking the Eternity. You ought to be taking the hydrogen H2 stick with it. All those things, will, you need to get methyl. So start eating dark green leafy vegetables every meal, or get a methyl supplement. And if you put all that together, if you can take all of this malarkey that I've been throwing your way and just pick out the bits and pieces that are singular apropos to what you want to do, you've got the answer right there in front of you. Now, the one thing I'm saying, I explained a lot of it to you because I know you're not naive. You may not know, but you have the desire to know. And if I don't want to sell products based on hype and hope. I want to be based on facts and reality. And so that's why I've gone I hope I haven't gone too far afield into it. I suspect I have, but I wanted to give you all of these different facets and nuances of what the science is, what it can really do, so that within yourself, within your heart of hearts, you will realize that this is true and this is possible, and no other company on planet Earth is approaching this at all the way that we are. There's bits and pieces here and there. We've got the whole enchilada for you, and we're going to put more and more on top of it as we progress, as it's found, as we can do it. So anyway, that's my long message that I gave you today. Sorry I went so long. I apologize to you again, but I'll turn it back to you, Don.
No problem, Tom. I mean, I'm sitting there listening to, and I'm thinking about all these seminars that I've gone to over the last 33 years that I've been a chiropractor, and I've paid hundreds of dollars, sometimes close to $1,000 just to get information like what you shared with us. So thank you. I mean, it's everybody here. We should all be thinking, man, we just saved hundreds of dollars by not having to go to pay for a seminar. So I appreciate that. I know we have a couple questions out there. People had questions regarding the science. So I'm going to first open it up over to Katie. I know Katie had wrote me 3 or 4 different questions. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Katie, and if you want to ask your questions of Tom here.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was just fabulous, Tom. Absolutely love listening to you talk about all science. So the question I had was, can we actually suggest to people to take a double dose, even though the bottle says, take 3 and 3? How do we word that? What do we say so we're doing the right thing?
Here's what I said it a little earlier on. It's dose dependent. Now, our recommendation for a person is 3 and 3. But because of a person's biological, their genetic makeup, their environmental issues, their age, how far they've degenerated, and those types of things, that's only a suggested number. To go down doesn't make much sense because these are synergistic at that level to remove glycation, lipofuscin, and increase NAD. But if your biology is more adverse, then you need to take more products because it's dose dependent. If that answers
Great.
it for you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. The other question I had is, you can read on the internet, there's a lot about niacin, and it says that in high doses, you know, I guess the question is it safe? And I did read that McCullough said that niacin that they're talking about in high doses was more, the studies that was done was more in relation to this slow release niacin, but my understanding is ours is, you know, sort of fast release. Is there any concern with safety there? What would you say to people about that?
Well, absolutely. If you take a high dose of niacin, it's detrimental to you. We don't give you a high dose. Here's the thing to remember. Niacin is nicotinic acid. That's what niacin is, okay? And so we use some. If you go above 30 milligrams, then you cross over. At 30 milligrams, it's very helpful in producing NAD plus, but it's not the main driver, but it is an important factor. But vitamin B3 has a number of different types of varieties in it. And with that, we use niacinamide. And what that is that's nicotinic acid with an amide, an amino acid, an amide on it. So what this does, if you want to think of it in this kind of terms, if you have niacin, it's nicotinic acid, it's an organic acid. And on the pH scale, you hit 7 is neutral, below 7 is acid, above 7 is base. It goes from 1 to 14 on the scale. So you get nicotinic acid, and you're getting down about 3.5 on the pH scale. So it's fairly acid. Your stomach is 1 to 2 as a comparison. And every time you change from one level, the power of it, pH means power, hydrogen atom, whether it's hydrogen is, if it's H plus, it's acid. If it's OH, it's base. But anyway, I won't explain all that to you. But as you go down, if you go from 7 to 6, it's 10 times greater. Then go to 5, it's 10 times 10 or 100. Then 1,000, then 10,000, then 100,000, then 1,000,000, then 10 million, and you're getting down in there. So you have, as you get more acidic, you have, and of course, same thing happens on base when you go the other way. But acidic is very reactionary, and base is too if you really get up in the higher levels. But our body is essentially based. We have an acid mantle on our skin, but that's only from the sebum that's secreted from the skin. The actual skin cells and all of the tissues in between to the rest of our body has a pH of average about 7.38. So it's just slightly base. Okay, well, if you take nicotinic acid, there's quite a reaction with the base, which is on the other side of the pH scale. So if you get a large amount of it, you get a large reaction. And the bad thing about it is it causes a lot of vasodilation if you get real high like that, which can do damage. But at 30, you want that vasodilation to make the blood vessels more reactive and flexible, so it can carry more blood and opens up the tissues to receiving more nutrients. Plus, then it goes in as part of the process with tryptophan to create NAD with it. And you'll notice we have tryptophan in our products. You won't see that in anyone else's, which is there. So then you turn around and you go to niacinamide. There is no upper limit on niacinamide. It has a pH of 7.5. So now you're on the other end of the scale. And because of that, you don't have that. You have no vasodilation at all with niacinamide because it's based on acid. It's nicotinic acid with an amino acid complex, an amide on it. So it's niacinamide, and that's where it is. So we use large amounts of that. Now that is readily converted into NR or NMN if you can have ribose with it. There's a company that's tried to tie up the market through Procter & Gamble, and they've developed NR, which you can easily produce, but they developed NR and they use the blueberry extract with it. So with that, just so it's patentable, it's a different molecule. Now it's patentable, even though it's got niacin, ribose, and the blueberry to bond with, it's called stilbin. But with that, it's very subject to deterioration and breakdown. And if you take niacinamide, which has almost no breakdown through the digestive system, and if you take ribose, which has virtually no, and ribose is the energy molecule too. If you take that, and there's almost no breakdown in the system, what happens is for the quantity you take, you'll produce a lot more NMN, which is what NR is producing. Also, and with more NMN, you produce more NAD plus. So that's, I hope you followed me on
Yes,
that.
yeah, I am. That's great. Thank you very much. And I guess the last question I had, so can if people are asking how long can they keep taking 12 if they feel they get a better result or they need it, is that okay to keep taking the 12?
It's okay forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, some things, if you took too much calcium, you'd have a problem. But really what you're doing with this is, how clean can a cell be? Okay, it gets clean, it stays clean. If you have more power, how much energy can a cell produce? Well, there's a thing called homeostasis. And when homeostasis means the maximum operational potential of a cell. And so the closer you get to homeostasis, the better that you are for energy and repair and regeneration and health and everything. So, but once you hit an ultimate level, it doesn't go beyond that because the cell is self-regulating. So with this, you take a lot of it, well, you'll hit it back. So you'll hit homeostasis and that's it, you're there. So if you're taking more, okay, more is better up to a point where you reach homeostasis. Then after that point, then you want to find a balance, because it's just a matter now, not of biological damage, but of economy of use with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So.
Fantastic. That's it. That's the 3 main questions I had. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer them. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Let's run over to Andrea up in Michigan. Andrea, I know you had some questions for me as well, and for Tom. If you want to unmute yourself and throw some questions over there to Tom as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think you kind of answered it, Tom, but Doc was explaining to someone that we did a 3-way with yesterday that your 5th edition of the AGE pill, you actually took those 2 substances and developed it so that we were developing more inside the body so that we're not losing effectiveness of the product.
Yeah, you're spot on there. There's 2 things we do, Andrea, with it. It's not what you ingest, it's what you absorb. And so the stomach acids are so severe that if you take a compound like NR, it decomposes it badly within the stomach acids. And so you lose a lot by the time it gets into the small intestine. If you take niacinamide, it's very resistant to it. With it, and same with ribose, and so the molecular structure of it does not get deteriorated, but nicotinic acid will get through with it. But when you build a compound like NR, it's too unstable, and so it gets broken down and complexed into other things. So what we do is we use those compounds because that's the way cells make NAD is with that. There's a number of factors that are involved in it, but not that many with your, well, of course, we have the glycation, the lactofusion, those are different things. But as you're trying to make NAD, which is the primary goal of what we're doing, and then we're saying, well, why run a car engine with fresh gas? If you got a worn out engine and you haven't changed the oil, it's nothing but sludge. So that kind of makes sense that way if you look at it practically. But since stomach acids are harsh, in fact, is of all the stem cells activity you have in the body, they replace the cells that are wearing out. Skin normally replaced in about 120 days or so. If you're younger, it's less than that, but nonetheless, a heart go 3 to 5 years and with that kind of thing. But stomach cells are replaced every 6 or 8 days because the attack is so intense with that. And as a consequence, when you put these volatile compounds in it that will react to such severe, that's why I gave you the equation of the factor of 10 on the pH scale. You get down to the acidic side from neutral of what the stomach is, you're talking about 10 million times greater in power. So you have to have something that's very stabilized to do it. But I don't like losing any of it. If it's theoretically, it's what I try to do. So I use those compounds and the ribose and tryptophan and nicotinic acid, niacin, and of course the niacinamide all go together. And we work with another compound in this, which is rosmarinic acid, that helps to increase the effectiveness of it coming together and metabolizing. And those are things that people don't even think about it with. Well, some scientists have found it because I found the science, and I'm putting it all together. And so as a consequence, when you take that into the cell will produce NAD. It's doing it anyway. Whether you take a supplement or not, you're producing it. It's just it goes down a lot. So now if you have a lot of these compounds, you can make a lot more NAD and everything goes up, regeneration, energy, all those things with it. So we do a lot. But the other thing, what I do is, since the stomach is so harsh and it destroys so much of something that you take, like if you took NAD and you put it in your stomach, it's gone. It'll never much, you might get a little of it get through, but most of it just be destroyed on NAD. But so anyway, what we're doing, and of course it's terribly expensive too, but so what we're doing is we take this formulation and then we put it into an enterically coated capsule. In other words, acid, this bulletproofs it against acidic breakdown. So these enteric capsules that we have will carry it through the stomach into the small intestine. Once it's in the small intestine, there are enzymes rather than acids that will break down the components of the enteric coating, and it will allow the contents to come out into the lower intestine where they are absorbed by the villi that are there, and they will come out intact. So we go a long ways to make sure we get everything we can into the small intestine to improve the absorption.
That's fabulous. As you were talking tonight, I had one more question come up in my mind. You were talking about the importance of the metal folate, and that we could get that as an additional supplement somewhere.
Yeah, any methyl supplement, if it's methyl based, but methylfolate is an inexpensive one, and it has a particular good effect, especially with the pregnant mothers and things like that, because a lack of folic acid, you can get along okay if you're an adult woman, but in forming the baby, you get spinal bifida if you don't have enough folic acid. But folic acid can also cause some real serious injuries where folate does not. So if you have a methylfolate, it works tremendously well for spinal bifida, but it has other energetic and other properties too that folic acid damages, and this actually is restorative.
Okay, so the question that came to my mind was, and maybe it wouldn't mix with the other substances, but I just wondered, if it could be added into the AGE pills so that we are automatically getting it.
Yeah, I've thought about that, but that's a whopping pill, and we're right at capacity. And so sometimes it's like I'd like to add the telomere in it, or like TSX into it.
We'd have to take
Couldn't
a
do
lot
it.
of pills.
Pretty soon you'd have so many pills in your mouth that your cheeks would be so bulgy you'd look like Doc Fizz.
Oh, he's looking pretty good nowadays, don't you think?
Yeah, he's improved quite a bit. Of course, he was in bad shape when I first met him, but he has improved quite a bit.
Be nice, Tom.
You're always picking on me.
So
Well, thank you. We appreciate the information.
Okay, you're certainly welcome. And the other thing, just drink, if you can do it, put it in your lifestyle. Make dark green leafy vegetables, especially broccoli is the best one. If you like that into your diet and eat it every day, and you don't even have to worry about a supplement.
Awesome. Great idea.
Or methyl. Okay.
Yeah, isn't that the important thing that if you know what foods you can eat, you can actually get extra nutrition from that. And if you're somebody that's a poor methylator, then you really want to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and you never know whether you are or not. And you got to remember one thing: when you increase NAD levels as great as we do, you have methyl reserves that are within your body, and they're there for when you need. If you're spurring into running or action or aggressive things you have to do physically one way or another, that's there. So the methyl can create a lot of energy through the methylization with the NAD. But if you're producing a lot of NAD, it takes a lot of methyl to do it, and you drain your reserves and your energy goes down.
Yeah, and I made a note that you previously mentioned broccoli, Brussels sprouts, spinach, asparagus, and avocados.
That's it. I mean, there's more, but the darker the green, the more methyl.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay.
Katie, did you have any other questions?
No, I'm all good. That's fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Tom, thanks for spending some time with us tonight. I really appreciate that. As we go and share this information with people, we always come across those questions, and we want to have the right answers. And I think sometimes, we might explain it because we've heard it from you, and then people come back and they say, well, we want to hear it from the superhero. And so that's why we have to get you on calls like this, and I appreciate you being able to take the time to share this information.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it because sometimes you need third-party validation. You may know what you're talking about, but people always question it. And if you go for an outside authority, then it has a lot of impact. So I understand that, and I'm happy I can do it.
All right. Well, thank you. And Andrea and Marcia and Katie, Trevor, thanks for joining us tonight. And we'll get this call out to everybody so that it's shared with everybody in the entire world if they want to listen.